I've already got it open. And one thing that I hadn't mentioned, and you guys might already be aware, if you have Visual Studio already open and you want to open it again, another instance, you can if you right-click on it in your taskbar and just click Visual Studio again. And then that way you can have it running, multiple times and copy things from one project to another, stuff like that. Some products let us do that and some don't, like Teams won't let us, but Visual Studio will. So I can have it running twice. For our project today, I think we're going to use our person class that we've used all along, or that came with our textbook, and we'll read in the XML file that we created. I've got that saved on Teams so we can all get to it. So don't worry if you don't have that older project from a couple weeks ago. We'll copy the code that we need and stuff into this project from that. So let's create a new one. Create a new project. And I want this to be a Forms app. So I'm going to search for Forms. And I've got Windows Forms app. And I am going to use this template that uses the .NET library. And I'm going to give it a name. Let's make it L12 because this really is an example for our unit exam. And we'll feed XML people display list, something along those lines. But we'll display all of those people on our form so that you can see how easy it is to connect all these things together. There is so much stuff to look at and learn when you're working with Windows Forms. I'm going to go ahead and create this. There's a lot more videos out on my YouTube channel if there's other stuff that you'd like to find. Like there's special videos about working with checkboxes or radio buttons, things like that. I don't have them all attached to Canvas, so you can search if there's more that you would like to find. And of course, the Microsoft documentation on working with Windows Forms has all sorts of great info. So here's my form. I'm ready to update it first to get some characteristics set for my whole app. My form here is not going to be super fancy, so I'm going to start out just changing my text property. So this is just you guys are just getting started with Windows Forms, so be sure to yell out if there's something, where your cursor isn't behaving the way it seems like mine is, or something's whacking you out. Just let us know, because you're probably not the only one. Remember, as we work on our form, we're looking for our properties window here to set and alter the properties and characteristics of our form. And the first property I want to change is the text property. Remember, I have my properties sorted alphabetically, and it just popped up at the text property from whenever I was using it before. So I'll change that one first. And I'll say this is going to be a list of people. And then you can change your back color to any color you like. I'll use my web list. I'll do maroon. Ooh, that's really looks red today. Try something else here. Maybe salmon won't be quite as red. All right, so here's my pretty form. I'd like to change my font property. So I'm going to expand my font and maybe click the 3 ellipses to bring up the font dialog box. And I'm just changing my default font here. So anything that I put on my form is going to use this font by default. I'll do it open here, and I'm going to make it about 12 points so that it's not quite so tiny. And notice that increases the size of my form. That's okay. Now,
random question. bunch of different fonts on here. And whenever I was doing this at home, it pulls all of them up. So if I used one of those, would it carry across to all systems since the font is on my?
I don't know. That's a good question. You could send me one and we can try it.
Okay.
Because it should be embedded in your project. So I think it would work wherever it was sent, but I'm not 100% sure. So let's try. We've never had any trouble with font, so I think it embeds it. All right, on our form, we're going to create a big box in the middle here to list all of our people's information. But down at the bottom of our form, let's use a label, and we'll use it for messages, things like that that might pop up. We didn't use a label control last week in class, but you probably have with your experimenting. I'll go ahead and put my label down here at the bottom left. Make sure it's kind of visible. And then I'm going to name this control something because label 1 is not very helpful. I'll make it be like label message, because this would be like a message to our users. If you run into some sort of error or something, we can display it in this label. And then I want to change the text property of my label. Now, if we delete the text property altogether, I'm going to do this here. When I press enter, it's really hard to see that label on the form, isn't it? You might not even know it's there if you opened up this application and you just started working on it. So there is a way I could get back to it though, if I were clicked off someplace else and didn't know it was there. And that's in my properties window, because my properties window has this drop-down list. And when we click on something in our form, it is always made the selected item in our drop-down list. But if you look at your drop-down list, it contains information for all of the controls on your form. So I can find my label in that list and select it again. I don't like that, so I'm going to make my text property some sort of welcome message. Welcome to the people list. And then that way that label kind of shows up down there on the form. So just be aware there could be controls on the form that are hidden from you that you might not see when you just look at it. And sometimes people will hide things on the form to use to pass data from one place to another. So there's some interesting things go on there. But the control that we're going to use to display all our data is called a data grid. And it's down here in the data category. So I'm going to expand that. And I want this data grid view control. And I'll put it up here across my whole form. Now looking at your data grid, we're going to just pop our data into this. So we could do some customizations of it, but let's take a look at how it's going to play out. Now, when this application opens, we could do it several different ways. We could have the file already read and displaying on the form, or we could have a button that says like load data and have the form data load when somebody clicks on that button. We haven't done a form load yet, so let's put our code in a form load process so you can see how that works. A form load event procedure is the procedure or code that executes before the form displays. So we can put stuff in there that we want to have happen before the form is listed, just showing. So the easiest way to create a form load procedure, event procedure, is just to double click on a blank part of your form. So I'll double click down here just where it's empty, and that should create your form load event procedure. Everybody get that okay? Got it? All right, so in our form load, we're going to put our code to read our file and do all that great stuff. Now, before we can do any of that, we've got to get our project in order. I need to have my person class, and right now it's not part of this project. So I'm going to right click on my project and choose Add Class. And I'm going to name this person. Just because we want to practice a little bit on adding new classes to our project.
What did you click on to do that?
I right clicked on the Project and Solution Explorer and chose Add Class.
Okay.
You can also do it from your project menu. You can choose Add Class. I think there's a keystroke even for it. All right, so we don't need to code this whole class. Let's go to Teams and copy it. On Teams, in our meetings channel, if you click on Files, Lesson 10 code has some of those things from Lesson 10. That's where we wrote the XML file. I want to get this person class. I'm going to open it here in Teams. And I'm going to select all the information within my class. Control A, Control C. And then I'm going to paste all of that within my person class file that I created. Let everybody do that real fast, and then we'll take a look at it. Whenever we create a class, and I said, oh, you need to create this class for this CD object that you're going to get from W3 Schools. Well, there's a really easy way to do that. Let's see if we can find those tools. What I'm looking for is a class diagram. So I'm going to right click on my project and choose Add New Item. I don't know. Oh, yep, it is. The class diagram is available in my list. Is it available in yours? No, you don't see it? Okay, let's make it available. I'm going to cancel and use Tools, Get Tools and Features. And this won't take as long as it does when we're getting major workloads. We'll just be adding one thing. Okay, when this screen loads, you want to click on individual component on that file up here. Go there for me. And I want to search for class. Oh, there it is. I need the class designer. So if yours is unchecked, go ahead and check it and then click modify and let it install that real quick. And it is just a couple little things, so it shouldn't take very long. And I'm going to close out of this.
Do we have to change the namespace on this?
We do. Did you guys hear that? That's if we need to change the namespace in our person class, and we do. So I'm going to go to any of the files that are already within my project, the program.cs or my form1.cs, and find the namespace, my long L12 namespace, and copy that and paste that into my person class so that they're the same. Good job. How's that going? Is it finishing up for you guys? Getting some installation done. Right, if it's finished up, we can use that. And so I'm going to try that again. On my project, I'm going to add a new item. And what I want to add is this class diagram. It names it class diagram 1. That's fine. We can use that name. Let's just add it to our project. The class diagram gives us the ability to view a class, kind of its UML diagram. Right now, it's not showing us anything, but if I take my person.cs file and drag it and drop it on my class designer, it'll show me the class diagram for that class, which is really helpful. But the other thing that it does that's really cool, that I can't show you until you've already learned some things, is that it has this whole class designer tool down in the bottom half of the screen. So if I wanted to add additional properties to my class or do anything to my class, I could just add additional information down here in this class details, and this will generate the code. So here we have, it says that there's a person constructor, default no-arg constructor on our person. So we can see the two constructors, one that requires a parameter of initial salary and one that has none. Yes? Just drag your person and drop it on this. Is it doing it? It's just so hard if you don't see it, isn't it? It's form stuff is definitely visual. Okay, so using this class details screen, you guys could generate that CD class really, really quickly because you'll create your new class, then load this class diagram tool. Then you can come to this class details area and just type in all of the different properties that that class needs. And then when you're done, you can go back to your class and it'll be changed. Like if I want to add a new property here, let's just try one. I'll add a property, test property, and this is going to be an integer, that's fine. And I want it to be public. That's all I need to do. Now, if I look at my person class code, find it here, slide this out of the way. I should see that my new test property has been created. Now, notice it didn't use the same exact syntax that we were using. Might have to be cleaned up a little bit, but it'll generate all that code for you. So, like I said, I can't show it to you right at the beginning of working with classes, or you might not get familiar with the code that's required. But now that you know something about working with classes, I can show you that tool that lets you get that done really quickly and easily. I'll delete this test property out because I don't want it. And that should make it disappear from my diagram also. With our diagram, we can see everything that we need. Now we could let's drag our form1.cs file onto this object diagram. This is our form class, but we can look at it in the same way. We can see that right now it has the constructor method, form1, and it has the form1_load method that we've created so far in it. So we can see all that detail looking at this class diagram. So it's a wonderful tool. Okay. So we've got our person class set, and we made sure that our namespace was the same so that we can use this person class in other parts of our project. Let's go back to our form1.cs file where we left our form load. Here's our form load. And for the form load, we want some code that is a lot like what we had when we generated that XML file. So I'm going to copy some. They go back to Teams, to those files. And in our program.cs is where we had our code before, because remember we weren't working with a forms-based application. So we just had our program.cs. I don't need any of this code to create the instances of people because we're going to be reading them in from that XML file. But what I do want is all this code that creates the XML file and everything. So I'm going to start at line 33, and I'm going to select down to line 62, and I'm going to copy all that code. Now we're not going to use all of it, but we're going to copy it and paste it. Did you see that meme someone posted on Discord in our programming memes and stuff? It said something about, I've been a copy paste programmer for 10 years. How can I learn how to really code? When you look at copying and pasting, you have to know quite a bit to actually do that sometimes, don't you? I've got all sorts of errors because I also need to copy those using statements. But I have to be careful because I need to make sure I keep my using system windows.forms import because that's new for my Windows forms. So I'll delete all those in between and keep using system and using system.windows.forms. Now go back to Teams, and in our code there, we had all those other using statements that they asked us to add. Copy those. Okay, so now in your form1.cs file, you should have all of these using statements and these using static statements. So make sure you have all 8 of them. Getting crazy. Now, because we put our using statements in, we should see that a lot of those errors have disappeared. So I'm going to scroll down to my form load and make sure it looks, oh yes, much happier. Now, as I look at the code, I still need this XS object, our XML serializer. We need that object to read a file. We need to know the path name to read our file, but I don't need any of the rest of this code. So line 28 through 38, I'm going to delete. Deserialize code, we didn't actually do it in our class, but it's in the video for this same activity. And all it is they just popped in a little teeny bit of code here to deserialize the XML file that we'd written. This code looks good, but I don't need this for each statement, so I'm going to delete it. Now let's look at what we have left in our form load. It's not got very much. We deleted most of the code, didn't we? All we have is creating our object that will be our XML serializer. We have a path name for our XML file to go find it. And then we have this using statement. And within the using statement, we make a list of all of the people that are deserialized from that XML file. So I need to make one more change in my code here. This loaded people list that gets created in this using statement is local to that using statement. That variable will only be available within that using statement. And I want to use that variable after our using statement. I want that whole list to be available to us. So let's create it outside of the using statement. Create a list called our people. So when they declare this here, they use the var data type, which is like any data type. It's like variable. I don't know what your data type is. I'll figure it out. Well, it can figure it, the compiler can figure out what data type this loaded people is because we allocate it as a list of person objects. That's the only way we can get away with using that var data type. Since we're going to allocate this thing separately, we have to tell C#, this is a list of person objects, and I want it to be named loaded people. Now I can take the var keyword off, the one that's within our using statement, because it's already created now. So that's why I was getting errors on that. C# was saying, why are you trying to create this? You already have it. Does that make sense? We didn't want that loaded people to disappear when our using statement was through. So we had to allocate it before we go into our using statement. Now I'd like to use our list to populate our data grid view. So our data grid view object is a new object we haven't used before. And I can always use the dot in Visual Studio in the IDE to bring up IntelliSense to look at all of the different properties and behaviors associated with this data grid view item. So I could explore as much as I wanted to and look at all of these kinds of great things. Wrong object. I've got a class there and I want the object. Let me try that again. There it is. I want our object, the lowercase one. So whenever it turns aqua like that, it should have been a key to me that it was looking at the class, not the instance of the class that we put on our form. And I want the instance of the class. Now, again, I can look at all the different properties and behaviors a lot more when I'm looking at the instance. That makes sense. But what I'm looking for is the data source. So I can keep scrolling through, or I could just type a D to go down to the Ds, and I'll pick data source. We're going to say our data source is our loaded people list. You should find all the people there. Now, in our project, we're assuming our XML file already exists. So we've got to grab that one from the Teams files before we can run this. So I want to go to this folder in File Explorer. So I'm going to right click on my solution and choose Open Folder in File Explorer. And I'm going to navigate into my bin folder, my debug, and my Net 5.0 Windows folder. Right here in this Net 5.0 Windows folder is where I need that XML file. That's my project folder. So I'll go to Teams. A couple of different ways we can do it. Let's just create it here before we go to Teams. I'll right click and choose New. Now this is a way for me to get a bunch of you messed up. So stick with me. I'm going to say New Text Document because I don't have an option here for an XML file, do I? So I'm going to say New Text Document, and I'm going to name this. Let me double check. We want it to be named people.xml. So people is my first part, and then I want to change the .text to XML. So make sure you're changing your .text, your file type, to XML, or else you're going to end up with a file named people.xml.text, and that would not be the right file name. So you should get this message that you're changing the file extension. Are you sure you want to change it? Yes, yes, I do. Now I've got my little XML file there. I can open it in Notepad because it's just plain old text. It doesn't want any fancy formatting. And then I can copy that stuff from Teams. Lots of different ways we could do this. People.xml. I'm going to copy the whole thing and paste it in my file in Notepad. Now I want to create this file that way because it's so important for us to get those file types right when we're creating files, and we can cause ourselves a huge amount of trauma by not having the file type right. Remember, your view setting should always be showing you file name extensions so that you can be sure of what that thing is named. All right, I think we've got everything in place now. We pulled all these pieces together to make our new project. In our new project, before our form displays, we're going to set up our XML serializer. Which one?
The last line of code in the form mode. The one where it's in the data grid.
The people class?
No, not in the people class. Yeah, not in the person. Yeah, that.
That? Okay. I'm trying to get in the right place. If anybody else needs anything, let me know. Let's go ahead and set this up to run in the debugger. I'll set line 23 to be a breakpoint. And I think I'm ready to run it. Now we should see the debugger before we see our form, because remember our code is running in the form load, so we're preparing our form to display. We've got all of our stuff down here in our auto screen. I'm going to go ahead and click step into because I just want to watch each line of code execute. Here's my path name getting set up with people.xml at the end. I can step through that and make sure that it opened my file okay. It looks like it did. Now it's going to go into my using statement using my file. It's going to open it. And I guess it was able to. And now it should use that deserialize process to read all of the people as defined by our person class. So we will see that it's got some work to do here. It's got to get the first person and the next person, setting up all of their properties. And our last person, I think we just had 3. And then I think we should have our list done. Here's our list right now. It's still showing null because we haven't finished executing this line of code. I'll go ahead and step into to finish executing it. And now my loaded people list should have some things. It does. It says it has 3 entries and it has a person in each of these entries. If I expand one of my person objects, I should see my person properties. Now everything looks good, so I'm going to go ahead and step into my last line that should set up my data grid with all of our people. Mine's being wacky. How about yours? I got to keep running. Let me keep going, keep going. Now, if you look at your form, you should see, I can't move mine over because it's locked up, but you should see as you go that every time we execute a getter, it's adding data to one of your cells in your data grid view. I know, I'm trying to get, come on, let me see you. Still going. Debugger was a bad idea. We can see that it's interacting with our class a lot, for sure. I'll just look at it.